Start anyway. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Can the audio people hear me? This is Happy Cambers, Lessons Learned from Scouting's Premier Leadership course. If you're not interested in this or just don't want to hear my lovely dulcet tones, you're in the wrong room. So the last 2 years, I participated in a training program with the Boy Scouts of America, hence the stylish uniform. It's a program, it's an international program. They have it in several countries around the world, dozens. It's to teach leadership skills to their adult scouters. So the question I had when my brother suggested I talk about this was, what are the parallels? Well, the Boy Scouts of America and the open source movement, at least in my career, had a lot of parallels. Boy Scouts of America has about 2 million youth, about 1 million adult leaders, and 1,300 individual units, I think. The numbers are online. Most of the adults, 90% of the adults, 95% of the adults, are all volunteers. All of the kids are volunteers. The parents actually pay for them to participate in Boy Scouts. Much like open source, there's a lot of volunteerism, not a lot of paid positions for doing a lot of the stuff that we do. This is about teaching volunteer leaders how to run volunteer groups. Pretty much the parallel to every open source project I've worked on. So let's see. Wood Badge. Wood Badge was started in the last century now. By Lord Baden-Powell himself. It was his attempt to start a leadership program for the adults that he was encountering with Scouts. How many people here know who Robert Baden-Powell is and the history of Scouting? Okay, so I won't have to go into too much of that. So just to let you know, Wood Badge, as it's currently taught in the United States, is a 6-day course with an 18-month follow-up practical part of the program. I have a little less than an hour. So I'm not going to go cover everything. This is going to be a little rushed. It's going to be a little hurried. And I was working on my slides this morning, so it's going to be a little rough. But I'm going to try and cover the basic gist of this, because I think most of the instructions that they give translate well to what we need to have as open source programmers. First thing they cover is values. The values are the core beliefs that your community has, the community around your project have. They talk about who you are as a community and what you believe in. The Boy Scouts' core values are put into their oath and law. The oath and law are up here. If you can't read them, I'm sure you can find somebody in a scout uniform who can rattle them off for you in a few minutes. Well, a few seconds. Most people know them. This is the part where you're honest, trustworthy, brave, loyal, etc., etc. Values in the open source community, we value cats. But more so, we have some certain ideals that we value. When I Googled around, I actually ran onto opensource.com, and they had the open source values were open exchange, participation, rapid prototyping, meritocracy, and community. We believe that things should be hackable. We believe that people who want to participate should be allowed to participate regardless of their skill level or their their backgrounds. We believe that things should be open, and we should be able to break into things and work with them and move forward with the code that we have and the tools that we have. Another great example, Drupal actually has a great mission statement and a great value statement. Drupal listed their values as flexibility and simplicity and utility in our product, teamwork, innovation, and openness in our community, modularity, extensibility, and maintainability in our code. That's a beautiful set of values to try and live up to. Whether Drupal does or not, I'm not sure. I don't actually use Drupal, but that's their goal. That's the values that they're striving to maintain. In the Perl community, we have Tim Toady. When I actually did a Google search for bicarbonate, this is one of the slides, pictures that came up. So we're making an impact, taking over soda. So we have Tim Toady, but we also have Larry's 3 values of a developer: laziness, hubris, and impatience. These are the values that we as a Perl community want to espouse and want to embrace and suggest to people. If you don't know Tim Toti bicarbonate, Tim Toti is, there's more than one way to do it. Bicarbonate is the way to settle that down a little bit. But sometimes consistency is not a bad thing either. These are acronyms that, well, the second one is an acronym that Stephen came up with. The first one's Larry's. If your values are your attitudes that your community have, your mission is why your community is there. So the mission of the Boy Scouts of America is, let me quote this right. The mission of the Boy Scouts of America is to prepare young people to make ethical and moral choices over their lifetimes by instilling in them the values of the Scout Oath and law. Basically, they want to teach every boy how to be trustworthy, honest, loyal, brave, clean, reverent, etc., etc. And they want to give them some practical skills to do that by taking them out into the woods and having them camp, by showing them how to make pen with derby cars and other various things that you do as a scout. And it's not just young men, it's young women as well. My daughter is involved in the Boy Scouts of America in a program called Venturing, which has the lovely green uniforms. In the same vein, Drupal, again, had a great mission statement. The Drupal mission is to build the best open source content management framework, one that represents the newest ideas and best practices in community publishing, knowledge management, and software design. We believe in open source innovation, globalism, and collaboration. These are big dream goals for why they exist, ideas for why they are going to be, why they're going to do what they're going to do, why they're around. But you don't have to have big ideas. You can have smaller ideas, like Moose. The best mission statement I can see for Moose, having looked around and been involved with the Moose community for too long, I think, at this point. Moose's mission statement, from my opinion, a postmodern object system for Perl 5. It's small, it's concise, that's what it wants to be. But once you start unpacking that, and I have a blog post somewhere where I unpack the whole concept of why Moose is postmodern and what that actually means, it gets bigger and it's kind of inspirational and there's some places you can go with that. But that's a big change, especially if you knew Perl before Moose and had to do object orientation without Moose. Having the goal of having a good postmodern object system for Perl 5 is a good mission to have. But we can even get even smaller than that. Bender. How many people know Bender on irc.perl.org? About half. That's not bad. Bender's mine. Bender's a project that I wrote long before I knew Moose. And Bender's original mission statement was teach Peregrine Poe. How many people know Poe? Everybody say hi, Rocco. Hi, Rocco. That way, when he sees the video, he'll be happy. My whole mission for Bender was I need to learn how to write an IRC bot, or I need to learn how to do event-driven programming. I want to write an IRC bot to do that. It grew bigger than that. We'll circle back around to some of that in just a little bit. It's kind of popular. It's the leader of a Perlmonger group, which just sort of happens. You fill out some forms, the next thing you know, you're ordained. That's also happened. So if you need marriage, I can arrange it if you want to get married on IRC. But having a mission is important, but a mission without a vision is just passing the time. Vision's is your idea of where you're going. It's your picture of future success. So how many people know about the Long Now project? Some of you, most of you, but not all of you. The Long Now project was created in, as they term it, 01996, 1996, but in Y10K dating. It's a Y10K project. It's a year 10,000 project. They're building a clock. Not just any clock. This is a clock that's supposed to work for the next 10,000 years. They expect it to chime in the year 10,000 and work. And that takes a lot of engineering. They're doing this in the deserts of New Mexico. They're doing it inside a mountain because when people, the way they power the clock is people come to visit the clock, they walk up and down the staircase, that powers the clock. They did it in the mountains because if people stop coming to visit, they can rely on the mountain, the heat temperature of the mountain, the size of the mountain changing as the temperature changes during the day to power the clock. They hired Brian Eno to write the generator for the chime sounds. And he wrote something that will not chime the same way twice for 10,000 years. That's quite a vision. When you're thinking about what am I going to do, what are we going to do that's going to outlast recorded history, basically? That's an impressive vision. But you need your vision to be meaningful. The Long Now project, their vision behind it was to try and inspire people to think about long-term projects, long-term problems. They also have the long-term bet, where you make bets that range over 1,000 years. How it's going to get paid off? But people make bets. In the Boy Scouts, you're trying to, the idea is to translate this down to what's a meaningful vision for your community, for your project. In the Boy Scouts, for your unit, for your troop, for your patrol, for your crew, boat, whatever. Ship, sorry. So here's some ideas. This is my biggest slide. And I did this so that this was a great set of bullet points, and I really liked it from the notes that I stole from Wood Badge. So this is up there so you can grab a picture of it real quick. To create a meaningful vision, you want it to engage the heart and spirit. You want it to lead towards a worthwhile goal, a proper object system for Perl 5. You want it to give meaning and effort to the community that you're trying to build. You're trying to get people to get together behind this and rally towards it. It needs to be simple, something that's achievable and understandable. It needs to be attainable. It's something you have to actually be able to attain. And it can change over time. Back to Bender. So when I started Bender, Moose didn't exist yet. About 4 years after I started Bender, somebody wrote Moose, and MST came to me and said, hey, you wanted to know more about object systems? I got you a Moose. And I said, what's this? And so he introduced me to it. And so, okay, I need to learn this. This is cool. So I started rewriting Bender in Moose because Bender was my kick-around project at the time. A couple months later, somebody came to me and said, you seem to be the only person using Poe and Moose in the same project. Do you want to come work for us? And I said, do I ever? And then I learned why I didn't, but that's not the point. But I got my first remote job, and it worked out, and I really enjoyed it. And I had a couple years where I got to work with Steven and the II crew, and it was a lot of fun. And a lot of that led into what I'm doing now, where I own my own consultancy. And that's all because Bender, being the good child, got me a job. But because my vision for him changed. It wasn't just teach me Poe. It was now teach me Poe and object orientation, and where does this lead to? So, you have your vision, you have your mission, you have your values. You need to bring all of this to life. Life, there weren't a lot of good pictures for life, so it went with the cereal.
I like he eat it.
He will.
Okay.
So, first thing you need to know, listen to learn. Feedback is a gift. This is parroted a lot in the scouting community. Somebody takes the time and energy out of their day to tell you, hey, this is working, or this isn't working, or I had a problem with this, or they're taking their time and energy to say, hey, I care enough about this project that you released that I'm going to talk about it. It may not be positive, it may not even be nice, but at least they cared enough to say something. Most people, apathy is the main goal, and they just walk away. Effective listening to nice people, to not nice people, is a skill, just like any other. You practice it over and over again, and you get better at it as you go along. Listening is best when it's active and empathic, when you understand what the other person's saying and you're actually truly listening to them. One of the ways you can really cement that is take a moment after somebody said something to you Take a second, reformulate it in your own words and parrot it back. Make sure that they understand what you're saying, and that they're nodding and not just sleeping. Which
Don't
leads
say
into...
got it.
Exactly.
Don't say got it.
Exactly. Don't say got it. Which leads into communication. I just loved this picture way too much because this is how it sort of feels like to be on IRC sometimes.
Sometimes?
Sometimes. There's good channels and bad channels. If you weren't in Vicky's talk, you missed the good channels and the bad channels. But communication is the key to high-value teams. Enabling the teams to be able to communicate effectively is probably the best thing you can do as a leader, because really, without them communicating, it all falls down. And listening, communicating as well as listening requires finding common ground. Which leads into the next part of leadership, coaching and mentoring. When you accept a position of leadership where you start caring about a community and you want to help it, you need to start, you start taking on responsibility for coaching and mentoring. They're often used as interchangeable terms, and they're really not. Coaching is specifically an individual who helps develop skills and capabilities in another person or people, i.e. a team. This is much more task-oriented. You're helping them get better at something. You're helping them get better at time management. That's what your Scrum Masters are all doing. Shout out to my brother. You're trying to encourage people to get better at a specific task or a specific set of skills, or just be better as a team together. Whereas mentoring is an experienced leader who becomes a trusted guide and a counselor of another individual. This trusting relationship may extend past coaching, a typical coaching role, into helping instill values and helping them with more personal problems or real, things outside of the scope of your normal communication. He's going to blush, but Stephen was a really good mentor for me for a very long time, helping me figure out how to get past where I was when he first brought me into Moose. I looked at this picture when I picked it, and my first thought was, okay, well, the guy is obviously explaining something to her, and this isn't a great picture because he's mansplaining, and then I really thought about it, and no, look, he looks kind of nervous here. And she's, sitting back and letting him get through his thing and is ready to give him advice to help mentor him moving forward. So it really turned around, when I started thinking about it, the picture really worked better, and I really kind of liked it. Diversity. So one of the things that you need to leverage in your teams, and this is a common theme, it seems like for many, many years at Yapsity, is diversity. Leveraging it through inclusivity. As a Perl programmer, let me get through this. Leading change to become more diverse is critical to any endeavor to remain relevant. As a Perl developer, I'm fully aware that to be relevant means we need to have more new people. We need to encourage more people to join up. We need to make them part of the community. I watched the director of Active State's talk on the video from yesterday. It was fantastic. He's saying that Perl's not really shrinking. Their measurements show that Perl's growing in enterprise, that most people have less than 3 years experience in Perl. But those people aren't translating into YAPC attendees, they're not translating into workshop attendees, they're not translating into hundreds of new people online as much as they could be. And we need to encourage them to do so, because that kind of diversity, those ideas, those new people are our lifeblood. Who knows what they're going to invent and what they're going to bring back to us. But it's not just reaching out it's not as hard as it sounds. When you think about diversity, you're thinking about reaching out to underrepresented groups and being a champion and what's the button I saw somebody was missing, the social justice rogue? It's not just all about that. It's much, much simpler too. Think about who your first string players are. These are the people that you go to first when you have a problem. What do they look like? What do they think like? How do they act? Are these people, do they mirror your ideals and your vision? Well, what about your second string players? What about the people that you don't go to? The other people on your team that you could reach out to? Why don't you go to them? Or when you do go to them, why do you go to them? Start reaching out to more of your team and using more of your project, more of your community, and make sure that everybody feels included and participates. Consider how your leadership affects that. There'll be a talk later, I'm sure, that has much ranting and cursing. And the person that it's targeted at does a very good job of leading in a lot of ways, but can be also very off-putting in a lot of ways. Think about how your presentation affects people. He's very conscious of that and is very aware of that, and does think about it a lot. Perhaps not enough, but he's working on it. Take time to show that you care. Recognize individual achievements as well as the team achievements. Cite out people if they specifically did something good, or just make sure that they understand that you appreciate what they've done. The whole team, everybody on the team. Bruce came up to me after an OPW one year with this video game that he had called Peggle, that when you win, it just goes over the top and really announces and says, hey, you've done a great job. And his feedback was, this is the kind of feedback you want to show people when they get to a certain point. I see some scowls and some skepticism, but even if you don't go over the top, make sure that people feel valued. The other piece of diversity is generational diversity. I got a picture of Stephen and Sawyer here. No, no, this is, I just liked the picture because it reminded me of my family a little too much. My son would totally have a mohawk, but he's rocking the mullet right now. But the generational diversity is a personal thing for me. My mom was a programmer. She started out in 1969 on PDP-11s, debugging hex error codes and programming from switches on the front end of the machine. When I was growing up, she was a DBA. She ended up head of management information systems at a semiconductor plant over in Tampa. They're the people who came up with the Prism chipset, which was really popular in Wi-Fi for a while. If you ran a Wi-Fi router in the late 90s, you probably ran the Prism chipset because it was the hackable one. I wouldn't be where I am without my mom. But over the course of our careers, she did more IT or more Microsoft. I did more Unix, and it balanced out, and we were able to help each other. When she retired, moved up to rural Georgia, and started working with the local quilting bee and took over their internet site, they were using IIS and FrontPage. And she needed somebody she could come to and complain at, who would just feel her pain. And I just finished working in a Windows lab at the University of Central Florida, and I totally felt her pain dealing with IIS at that point. So think about think about what the different generations can contribute. We tend to have an older population, so think about what the younger populations can bring in. But also, Larry's got some great stories that he and I traded a couple Yapsies back. I was using mom's stories, but he has some great stories about the early days of his career and dealing with some of those machines. So, more practical. Your job as a team leader is to move your team through various stages of success. So what are some models for this success? Keep in mind, these are models. These are just a metaphor. If you don't know what a metaphor is in this context, I have another talk that is fantastic. There's video of it from 2 years ago. Unfortunately, the better talk I gave 2 weeks ago still hasn't been posted online. I think the audio on it was bad, but I will probably give it again in the future. If not me, then the guy who wrote it, my business partner, Kip, will do a fantastic job. But these are models for success. This is some ideas, some places where stages that your team will be in at various points and ways to deal with interacting with them. They start out, they're forming. They have low energy. Well, low energy sounds like they're lethargic, like they haven't had their coffee, but that's not really it. They're confused. They're starting a new project. They're really not sure what to do yet. They don't have a lot of motivation to work on the project yet. they really just don't know what they're doing. I'm at this point with some of the projects with a client of mine where we're supposed to be starting to do bring in some new technology, and it's a frame set and a toolkit. We just haven't worked with it before. So I really don't know the first thing about what I'm doing there yet. I'm going to learn it. I'm going to figure it out. It's just going to take me some time. But I'm at the low skill, high energy. I really want to do this project, but I'm not really sure what to do yet. I just don't have the skills. This is where you as a leader can really start encouraging people to figure out the right direction, how to start moving forward, start picking off pieces to say, this is where we're going to go, this is how we're going to do it. Be a bit more engaging about it. The next step is storming. This is where they have low skill and low energy. They've started in on the project, and it's just not working right. They've started working at booking, and they've discovered the big ball of mud that is the main Git repository. They're confused and trying to move forward, but this is where they're going to start sniping at each other. I have 2 kids, a boy and a girl. Once they get into this stage, it's just no end of aggravation. They're just going to be all over each other and fighting with each other. This is where you need to help reinforce that communication, reinforce the values, teach people to play nice. This is where you need to really be demonstrating your core values as a team. After this, norming. This is where things are starting to gel. You're starting to move forward. You're starting to really build together as a team. This is where you need to start stepping back and getting out of the way and guiding people forward and helping build this momentum that's moving forward. This is where, oh wait, no, I could do this. I know how to do this. And then the last stage is performing. This is where your team can build a tower of people. This is where you're really rocking things out and the cohesion's there and things are clicking and you really know what you're doing. This is where, as a leader, your leadership position is just to step back, be part of the team, and occasionally point out, okay, this is where the vision is, this is where we need to migrate to a little bit, but you're just letting people, you're just enabling things to happen, staying out of the way. This is the best place of being a leader. This is really where your goal is to be, is not really doing anything except hanging back and letting the team really gel. So these stages, they kind of progress like this. They kind of don't progress like this. They can go all over the place. You can have regressions. You can fall off the bike. You can fall off the horse. Sometimes you have steps backwards. Sometimes, like with my team, with my client, we're on a project right now. Things are working really well. Last night I was able to bust out some new code, get it shipped, come back out and hang out for an hour for drinks without an issue because we were gelling well on that project. But on this other project that we have coming up next quarter, we're still trying to get our feet underneath us. So we're in 2 different stages on 2 different projects. The context is important. Sometimes we take a step backwards. We think we had the right idea. We think we knew something, and then a spanner gets thrown in the works. The tool that we were planning on using isn't going to work out for us, and now we're thrown back to square one. And we end up back in the storming, where we're fighting about which tool is really the right direction to use. It happens. Just be aware of it as a leader, work through it, and try and help people get through it. So the model that Boy Scouts uses for all of this, for leadership places, and for training, is called EDGE. They have the leading edge and the training edge, because Boy Scouts love puns. I don't think they've thought about the U2 edge, but I'm sure they will if they ever see these slides. EDGE stands for explain. This is the first step. When your team's still in the low skill, high energy, low skill, you need to explain what's going on. Show them the mission, show them the values, teach them, sort of stand up, doing what I'm doing now. Next step, demonstrate. Show by example. Get out in front of them and actually show them and work them through it. Get some hands-on practice. Do some demonstrable tasks. Flip them over and show them exactly how you want to do it. Get out there and write web machine to show people this is what a REST API should look like. Then guide. This is when things are starting to gel. You really only need to help them get in line and sort of bring them back into the narrow and move forward. This is where you're starting to, okay, everybody, this is the direction. Now that we're moving, let's all move the same way. Let's all get lunch together. That's a big one around here. And then enable. This is the one where you really step back and you're just letting them move forward. And all you're doing is making sure that there's no blockers in their way. You're getting in front of and making sure that if the marketing department is going to weigh in on this, that they get the stuff to you before the team reaches that point so that you can just move, things can just keep moving forward. That if you need something from another team, that you're ahead of that and the team can just keep on moving. Or in teaching, this is where once they start doing it, you stand back and you walk through the room and you go, oh, no, that's right, that's good. No, try this a little bit. You just give them some small adjustments. Some other tools that you need to have, project planning. I don't really have many notes on this because most of us know what project planning is at this point. How many people have not planned or ran a project of any sense? See, no. Well, come to me after and I will explain to you project planning. Or I'll give you my brother's email address. He's a Scrum Master. He knows far more than he ever wanted to about project planning at this point. The key to project planning, have attainable goals. They're called SMART goals. Will, do you remember SMART?
Oh boy.
Successful, measurable, attainable, trackable? Reproducible, and trackable. These are the keys that you want to have for making sure that your project can be completed and that you can measure how it goes there. Leading change. Change is hard. Things, go in a completely different way, and sometimes you need to figure that out. I'm sure Rick could probably tell us more about leading change than any of us wanted to know. Rick really helped reformat how Perl 5P, the Perl 5 Porters process, really worked in a lot of ways. He gets a lot of credit for that and a lot of dings for that. But he had a vision. He wanted to help people get there, and he led the change to try and get there. I think that takes some kudos. Managing conflict. So when you're in the starving stages in any group, there's going to be some conflict. You're going to run into situations where you're not going to agree on things, and there's not going to be a right answer. And as a leader, or as a interested body, goal is be empathetic, use active listening, communicate, try and figure out the common place that everybody can get to, and even if not everybody's on board, at least get the majority moving forward so that you can accomplish your vision and goals. Decision making and problem solving, think outside the box. Most of us are really good at problem solving. This is what we do for a living. We invent problems and then solve them. Sometimes we invent problems, didn't realize we invented them, and then somebody else has to come along and solve them later. I'm going to figure out that bind path issue. So I don't think we need a whole lot here. Self-assessment. So one of the things that Scouting emphasized was figure out where you are with things. Understand how you're doing. Talk to others about you. Vicky, at the end of her talk, she has her own personal feedback form for her talk. Tell me how I did. When she gave her IRC talk at Self in Charlotte a couple weeks ago, afterwards, everybody who came up to her said, I liked your talk, it was great. Her first comment was, what could I have done better? Tell me how I could have done better. She was constantly looking for, I guess, reassurance, but self-feedback, self-improvement. How can I do better? Where am I at? How well is this talk doing in the context of where I know it could be? So there's a lot of tools out there. Scouting uses something called 360 self-assessment. There's different ways to do this. Find one that works for you. The idea is to get yourself some feedback. Finally, leaving a legacy. This is the big thing that Wood Badge really imparted. It's good to have values and a mission and a vision for the future. But what you really want to do is make sure that your time spent in a project isn't forgotten. It's not that they have to remember who you are and what you did. It's that you have to leave things better than they were when you got there. And you want to leave behind something that's nicer than what you started with. Trying to think of a relevant example that's not self-aggrandizing.
Oh, honey, you got the stage. Do it.
So when YAPC needed a venue this year, it happened to be that a very nice venue that they'd used once before reached out to them. I'm kind of particularly pleased that even though I didn't have anything to do with organizing this year, and the organizers deserve mad props, we're back in my hometown at a hotel that I'd vetted at one point, and this is a good venue. People seemed to like it, and people still showed up. This is part of my legacy to the Perl community, and I'm happy that it's still being used. But one of the tricks to leaving a legacy, and this is impounded a lot on the last day, is there's a secret to being a good leader. And my Scoutmaster at Wood Badge, course director is called a Scoutmaster, led up to this a whole bunch. The secret, and I'm going to give it to you now because there's more to Wood Badge and you should go, but I'm not really spoiling anything. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The golden rule. Don't do anything to somebody else that's hurtful. Leave the world in a better place. But the trick to that is that do unto others really only works if you realize that it's a game and it's your turn. It's your turn to act and to move forward and to leave something better for somebody else. And that's it. Questions? Do we have any questions? No? How much time have we got left? 8 minutes?
10 minutes.
Okay. Juggle? Give me something to juggle with. I can't juggle cans. I can soft shoe. No, thank you.
What was your critter and why is that important?
What was my critter and-
Control method.
So, what was my critter and why was that important and what's the patrol method? So Wood Badge is organized like a Boy Scout troop. It's actually organized like a Cub Scout pack and then a Boy Scout troop and then a venture crew. But generally it's organized like a Boy Scout troop. Boy Scout troops are broken out into patrols. Patrols are about 5 to 8 youth and they work as a team. They sort of mirror the much larger image. And the idea is that you get the patrol to work together, they learn teamwork, they move forward as a team, and they help reinforce each other. And it sort of breaks the big troop up into smaller pieces that the boys can then do self-reinforcement and self-learning. And the boys really end up in a well-run, boy-led troop. The boys end up running the troop themselves, and the adults sit back. And, well, we're not allowed to get a beer, but sit back and just sort of go, hey, good job. And we do the leading, the enabling. We don't, if it's working right, we don't have to do much. My boy's still in Cub Scouts. Cub Scouts is on rails. It's a lot more adult driven.
The den mothers have much more leadership.
Well, the den parents, but my critter in my patrol was antelope. So I was the last of the patrols to go. So.
I was going to ask what patrol you were.
I was an antelope. I was so the way the Wood Badge is organized in patrols. There's usually 8 patrols, and they're each given a critter. In North America, we use the same critters in every Wood Badge course, everywhere. So Will Beaver. Dan Wright was a Bob White. You can ask him about Bob Whites. Wolf. I was an antelope. Antelopes always went last. But in our district here in Central Florida, there weren't a lot of antelopes. Foxes tended to rule around here. There tend to be tons of foxes. And so when my wood badge course came up, they actually did a full patrol of antelopes so that more antelopes would be present in the district. And they shorted owls, I think. So it was a thing.
You're outstanding in your field.
Yes, I am outstanding in my field. And our ending song, when at the end of Wood Badge, you're supposed to sing a song, and every patrol is supposed to give a cheer. When they got to us, it was just headlights, which derailed the ending song for about 5 minutes as the rest of the patrols dissolved into laughter. But anything else?
Is there any sort of special song related to Wood Badge?
Would you like to come up and demonstrate the Wood Badge song?
I would love to if we could have our other beaver.
It's been a long
Come on, you'll remember. No, okay, fine, okay. We'll do.
So there's
I used to be
the
a Boy Scout.
okay,
And now I'm through scouting.
okay.
Okay. So instead of singing it as patrol by patrol, which you'd hear the same song twice, we'll sing it together.
Right. So it's back to Gil. Wow.
I used to be a Boy Scout and a good old Boy Scout too, but now I'm done with scouting and I don't know what to do. I'm growing old and feeble and I can scout no more, so I'm going to work my ticket if I can. Back to Gilwell, happy land. I'm going to work my ticket if I can.
And when you see 20 or 30 adults all singing and doing this song together, you realize exactly how cheesy and dorky scouting is in a lot of ways and how that's kind of awesome.
What's a ticket?
So the question is, what's a ticket? Because it was mentioned in the song. I mentioned that scouting is a 6-month project, or Wood Badge is a 6-month or a six-day program, but it took me 2 years to complete. I'm not on the remedial track. You do 6 days in-person training with scouts who'd gone through the program, or scouters who'd gone through the program before, teaching you basically all the stuff that I just taught you. It's long, it's laborious, it takes a lot of time, but then the next 18 months, there's a practical section where you have what's called your ticket, and you're supposed to have 5 items on your ticket that are things that you agree to do for your scouting community back home. And after you've completed all 5, that's when you get the fancy scarf and the beads and all of the regalia, the leather woggle. And I think that kind of a project, that kind of a training for open source would be fantastic. To have a 6-day in-depth seminar about leading and leadership and how to contribute to the open source community, and then an 18-month practical part where you have to go back to your individual open source communities would be a fantastic thing, which is why I wrote this talk, because I think that would be really great.
Code Badge, I'm working on the curriculum.
Okay, well, there we go. So, if that's it, thank you for coming.